Throughout the year, countless indie movies come out, some of which drop in theaters and some of which go straight to streaming. And you'll hear about some, but not hear anything about others. And usually, this has to do with the backing from the media or them coming across some sort of massive marketing budget. And typically, what happens is that if the media likes something, if critics like things, they'll get behind it and help to push it to get traction. But then there's some that go completely and totally unstated and unnoticed. You won't ever hear anything about them ever. Sometimes that's because the movie is terrible. Sometimes it's just because no one got a chance to see it. There's a lot of reasons. And sometimes it's because the topic of the film is so controversial that the media won't get behind it. Which brings me to the new film Rumors. I saw that this was coming out this week and hadn't heard a peep from anyone about it. So I decided to check it out simply because of the subject matter. It revolves around the G7 summit, which most of you probably won't know what it is, but it's basically a gathering of all the political leaders to sit around and have some level of a circle jerk and talk about how important one another are. And when I saw that this was going to be a fantasy, comedy, horror film, it really piqued my interest because there was a slight chance that this movie could have something really important to say. And so I looked it up and found it in my local theater. It was only showing in one in a very small number of showings, and it made me even more interested because it was clear nobody had it on their radar. And then I saw that I was the only individual in my theater that was going to be watching it, which added to my interest of it. So I went to check it out. I've officially seen it, and I'm here to tell you whether this movie is getting buried because it's way too controversial or if it's just a steaming pile of crap. As usual, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and give us some comments on if you know anything about Rumors, if you'd heard about it, or if you're intrigued now after listening to my commentary about it. And then visit criticalist.com. We're an entertainment reviewing platform, and you can find us in the app stores, Android and Apple. So you can go on and drop your review for this movie if you have seen it, or anything else that you've been watching lately. But let's go ahead and talk about this movie because at this point, I just have to speak on it. I'm kind of just mind blown at what I just sat through. And I'm going to go ahead and be very transparent up front and say that my mind is blown not by how amazing this movie was. This is going to be a full spoiler review. And in all honesty, I can tell you that you don't really need to worry about that because this isn't going to be a review where I encourage you to watch this because this movie. The only reason I could advise you to see this is just because I want to have people to have conversations with about it because I can't wrap my mind around what this movie even is or who it was for and who in their right mind decided to create this, which actually does bring me to everyone involved with this movie and what piqued my interest. Because if you look down here on the cast list, we've got Kate Blanchett, who jumped out right away. We've also got Charles Dance, who you definitely have seen in many things. And then we've got Alicia Vikander as well. So it's not like this is a totally unknown cast here. And now the three directors that are involved, which is pretty rare to have three directors on a film, Guy Madden, Glenn Johnson, and Evan Johnson, all three were involved as far as directors. And I've not seen anything that they've done before this. Now, the one thing that I saw at the post credits, and you can see here, is that Ari Aster is involved. That will get some of you very excited or make some of you extremely weary. This is the guy who directed Midsummer, and I was not a fan of that film and Hereditary. I think that this guy has a little bit of the devil inside of him, so I don't watch his films because they disturb me deeply down into my soul. Now, this film did not do that. It didn't disturb me in that kind of a way. It more of just perplexed and confused me. I'm going to go ahead and read the overview here. It says, en route to the annual G7 summit, the 7 leaders of the world's wealthiest liberal democracies get lost in the woods and face increasing peril while attempting to draft a provisional statement regarding a global crisis. Now, like I said earlier, most people probably aren't going to know what the G Summit is unless you keep up with politics. So that already makes this a little bit niche of a topic here. So you're already narrowing down who's going to be interested in this movie. Now, if you, with the G7 Summit, I mean, if this kind of sums up the individuals involved with this thing, it is the world leaders, and like I said earlier, it's kind of just this circle jerk where the world's leaders pontificate on what they should do with the world and the crises at hand and how everything and everyone should be handled. And so, with that being the topic of this movie and it being a comedy, I was like, man, they can really lean into something here. They can really hit on something super funny and totally and absolutely roast the world leaders while making fun of how stupid just all of this is and how self important they find themselves. And in a sense, that was the goal of this movie. But I think what really sums up this film and its failure is right in the first several seconds of the movie. Because what the movie does is it thanks the G7 summit for their cooperation. I do not kid. It literally says, thank you to the G7 committee for their support in the creation of this film. And I cannot imagine that any level of thoughtful commentary on something like this could happen when you are having the involvement of the exact people that you are making fun of. You can't really roast them. You can't really come after them, which is why this just feels like such a half step. And now, kicking things off, I was like, maybe we're on to something. Maybe this is going to be good because right in the opening several scenes, these group of individuals come across a dug up corpse in the ground on the location where they are meeting. And essentially, what this is a bog corpse, to where basically what happens is there's a body that's found underground and it's in these bogs, and the bones decay while everything else outside is preserved. So it's this boneless corpse. And then on top of that, this person had a necklace with their dick and balls hanging from it. And it was because this individual was a political person who gained the ire of the people who put them in that position. And they cut off his junk, tied it around his neck, and basically killed the person because they weren't serving the people. And I was like, holy crap, man, this is wild. They're actually going there. They're really going to roast these people and really lean into the failures of our governments and the fact that these people have very little to say and they don't really do a lot except for just line their own pockets. And if you know anything about me, I'm quite anti-government. I think most of it is a joke, and I don't think there's really such thing as a good government. There's just government, and it ends up being corrupt at the end of the day, regardless of how it ends up structuring itself. It just tends to happen every time. And so with this, I was like, man, we're really heading places. And then the movie just very soon after kind of goes off a cliff because it just aimlessly meanders. Now, I was intrigued for quite some time and was really curious about where it was headed. They get to this round table and they're all trying to, discuss where the world is headed and its problems. And that showed that their hypocrisies and just basically how aimless and stupid these people are, and the fact that they don't really have much to say. And as that was progressing, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. But and so what happens is we've got every country, sorry, that is a Freudian slip there, which I make quite regularly actually, but every country is represented, and basically it's just super on the nose kind of portrayals of each of them kind of personified by the countries that they come from. And essentially they all just very much represent what their country is. And that's fine, and it worked well to the point in which it's so on the nose that one of the countries literally says, hey, what if each of us is directly representing, what if we act and behave in which the way our countries do? Is there something to be said there? So it's very on the nose. But I think the problem really arises in this movie where it is part of this modern issue where they are trying to be so careful. They're trying to be so protective of everyone's feelings and not wanting to offend anyone, and also just not really truly step on the toes of those involved. These G7 summit meters and leaders, is that they are protecting everyone and trying to keep them safe. So they end up offending really no one at all. And that just makes it completely aimless and pointless because it goes off the rails quite quickly, like I said, in that they're just wandering through the woods, afraid of what is possibly going on, which is that these corpses are threatening them, but they don't ever really threaten them. They're just kind of around. So that's the thing, is the one that they found, more come to life. And they aren't shown a whole lot until later on in the movie, but they just kind of stand there and groan and moan until one scene when they're all standing around a fire, and basically all of these boneless corpses are just masturbating until they ejaculate and the fire goes out and they're gone. And what that means, I'm sure that this movie is just a wall to wall endless allegories, some of which you can pick up and are very on the nose, others of which are, I think, so coded and hidden that it would take someone that is extraordinarily steeped in politics to even understand what they're trying to say or even care. And to that point, it's like, why? Who was this for, when knowing about G7 and what goes on there is already a very niche topic in itself? And so as the movie progresses, they're just going through the woods, running from these corpses, being paranoid, and then trying to come up with this statement for the G7 summit. And all of them just kind of appear to be mindless idiots that can't really string together any kind of cohesive thought, and they're just not very smart. And it's like, okay, we get it, we all know that part. You're saying the quiet part out loud, I guess, or not even the not so quiet part at this point, because very few people trust the world's governments anymore. And that's just kind of it. There's a point in which we find Alicia Vikander, who shows up about halfway through the movie. She's lost her mind, is rambling in some Swedish, I think, language that's what they at least come to the conclusion of. And basically, she's talking about an AI coming and running over the world, and it's the end of the world, and it's going to be just all of humanity gathering together. And fine, I guess. But she's there with this giant brain out in the middle of the woods. Why? I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense. They don't explain it. We don't know why. And then eventually she makes her way back to said brain, climbs on top of it, lights herself on fire, and dies. Why? I have no idea. And there is just a lot of these moments that happen throughout where this is one of those movies where a lot happens, but also nothing happens at all. And so, the brain thing is weird and kind of cool at first, but then you're like, why? And they never explain. You don't know. And this all leads up to just basically them getting a text message, because no one is getting word from anyone. No one knows what's going on, and they just seem completely disconnected from the world at this point. So it's probably the end of the world. At least that's the conclusion that they're coming to. So they get a contact from someone on a phone, and they come to the conclusion that it's actually this AI meant to catch certain types of predators that prey on minors. I don't know what YouTube's regulations are with discussing that kind of thing. But so anyways, they decide to discuss with it and see what's going on, because it claims to be a child that is trapped inside of the place that they came from. And so, all of this is played as like a joke, but it's just all unfunny and mostly uninteresting. It's just a lot of drama. This movie looks fairly good. It feels like actually a very classic film. It has a very retro vibe to it. It looks fairly good. And I mean, all of that is fine and dandy. It's a little bit trippy. And I mean, I guess, sure, but all of this comes down to my main point, which is that if you want to say something poignant, if you want to tell a good joke, if you want to make proper satire, it has to also be interesting. You can't also just give this meandering, pointless romp for an hour and 45 minutes with something semi interesting to say, but nothing interesting happen up until that point where you say the thing out loud. And so here we are at the end of the movie. They basically find out that the AI has lured them to this building. They are all here to witness the end of the world, essentially. And as the world burns, they come up with their grand statement, and they've gathered their thoughts together, cut and pasted it all. And basically, Canada, who is very on the nose, Canada, you'll have to see it, and it'll make sense once you do. But there's no point in even explaining it at this point. But basically, they are all gathered together. They go off to the balcony of this grand location that they're at in Germany as the world burns around them, and they give their grand speech. But out in the lawn of this place where they are, it's full of nothing but the boneless corpses masturbating vigorously while they give this speech. So yes, you've got me right here in that the commentary is basically that no one really cares about their pontificating. No one really cares what they have to say or their great thesis or speech about the woes of the world, and that all that's listening is a few boneless corpses vigorously masturbating. And that is something kind of interesting to say, but everything getting up until this point was just kind of pointless, unfunny, and uninteresting. So by and large, I stick with what I said. I do not recommend this movie. I do not know why anyone would watch it. I don't know who it was for, and I'm not exactly mad I saw it because it's something to talk about with people, but also don't watch it. Don't see this movie. It's not good. It's not interesting. And what was the brain? I don't know. If you know, please tell me. And if there's any other allegories in here that I was probably missing out on, feel free to let me know, but I'm guessing that only about 8 people on the entire face of the planet are going to watch this movie, and I am one of them. So do I recommend Rumors? Absolutely not. When it comes to Criticalist, what kind of score would I give it? I don't know. I think it's probably somewhere in the low decent, high bogus, probably, because it's not a terribly made film, and the end message is kind of humorous, but you could have told that joke in several minutes. It's kind of like what I got at with the new Joker 2 movie, which is that, like, it could have just been made for way less money and done in a significantly less time. And that was the case here. The performances are totally fine and actually quite good. It looks fairly good, but at the end of the day, who cares? Who cares at all? I don't care. I probably won't remember Rumors a year from now or even 6 months, except for just the weirdness of the brain and the masturbating. So I don't know. That's just kind of where it sits. I don't recommend it. Don't watch it. And this has just been another review. Let me know your thoughts down below and drop a review in Criticalist. And I will see you back here next week for the news. And if you saw Rumors, I really want to know if anyone was capable of enjoying this movie and thinking that it was excellent. Until next time, guys, take it easy. It's been Reed.